Hey everybody, almost forgot to turn the microphone on. Sorry about that. I see Team Junk and Rick are both on the chat, so I guess the live show is going out in my YouTube studio. It shows this content is unavailable, so I'm hoping that this is working. Should be, but you never know with these guys. So happy Tuesday, and we're gonna go like we're going. So so happy Tuesday. Welcome everybody that's here. Appreciate y'all coming and joining the show. Okay, Rick says he sees me. Good deal. Awesome. Thank you for the heads up on that. And been just getting through the weeks. Working on the T-type. It's working. We can see you and hear you. Awesome. Great. Thank you, Team Junk. So, got the sprint finally done. Completely gone. Out of here. Had speedometer issues. And had to rebuild the rear end of the truck before it could leave. So I got that all done. And Dr. Jack picked up the car on Saturday. He did bring it back by today. He got a throttle cable issue that was already in the car. We're going to have to modify it. But other than that, yeah, everything is working. Hey, John, how you doing? Yeah, Team Junk. I knew it was Bill and Don. Glad you guys made it to the show. You too, John and Rick. So we got that thing thrashed out. It was a lot unexpected having to rebuild the rear end of the truck. And, of course, with Chuck's truck on the rack on the two-post rack with no fuel system or ignition electric system in it, that was not going to be able to be moved. And the T-type is on the four-post rack, and I've just about got the mechanicals done on that, about ready to install the wiring. And Scott's Skylark is in the shop, getting ready to put the engine back together and get it back in the car. So with the shop being full, I ended up rebuilding the rear end on the Sprint out in the driveway. Fun pressing the bearings in and out of the rear housing for the upper trailing arms, but got it done, and I think it's driving great, and like I said, speedometer's working now, so that's all great. And Sunday, went over to Bradenton with Mike and Chris Brill from Ravenswood Paint and Body. We ran his dragster again. So different track, different weather conditions, same car, same engine, same everything. And we made some carburetor adjustments and got it back into the 890s again. So that's two different events, both running 890s. And it was pretty interesting to see the times going down the track. 60 foot, 330, eighth mile, and then 1,000 foot and quarter. Everything was jiving pretty well along with the run tickets we had from Orlando. But it was funny, the 1,000 foot clocks were about 2.5 tenths difference, even though all the other segments were almost identical. So obviously one of the tracks, their 1,000 foot cones may not be in the exact same location. But Mike made some carburetor adjustments. I read the data, and we made tire pressure adjustments, and made some carburetor adjustments. He has Weber's on that thing, and he changed the chokes, and we made some jetting changes, and the final run was another 898 with a 6, I believe, at 147.96. So only 0.3 miles an hour off of personal best for the car. And the 60 foot and the rest of the numbers were a little slower than the personal best run. But we got it back into that same zone. So it needs a converter change. We had a lot of converter slip. and he already has a converter coming for it, but didn't have time to. I don't think he got it yet, and definitely didn't have time to put it in. But good to close out the year on 2 different events, and both of them running the right in that zone of the personal best on the car. So that was really good to see, and we had a good time. I didn't get a chance to put a video together for that yet, but I can show you. Let me go here. Where's the? Oh, okay, I got them all set up. So let me. So here's a different angle I got of the car. So yeah, that's a run. So yeah, so here's a couple different angles of the car. So here's a engine view. So this is off the back of the cage, and I wanted to be able to see the carburetors and linkage and all that stuff. So I thought it was a good angle. See the tires for burnout. Side draft Webers on there. Oh, too far. There we go. Watch when the car takes off. You can actually see fuel envelope coming out of the carburetors for a split second. So yeah, so I had some issues with the carburetor, with the camera stand staying positive. Let me see if we can get the... Here you can kind of see real lightly a little bit of a fuel cone coming out of the carburetors. See if I can advance it. Nope. Well, we can play it again real quick. Anyway, you could see the little fuel coming out of the top of them. See if this the run here. This is the last run. The first run, the camera didn't turn on, so this is the last run. I tried a different mount, so we'll see how this one works out. Still see a little bit of a fuel cone outside the carburetors. So that was the carburetor, the engine view. Got a couple other angles here. We tried to get a couple different angles here. Let's see. Yes, that's. So this is looking out the front over top of the roll cage. that was the that's the point of view that Mike has coming in the car. So we were playing around with cameras, and we also did a kind of like what we did last time, side view. Got a side view so you can see our opponents. Ryan, how you doing? So I'll stop this right here. I mean, he's already in the shutdown area, and you can almost see it. You know, not there. But if you look real close, I can't zoom in on this, but there is civilization. That is an embankment and a concrete wall. We go down here into the shutdown area, you can see it better. There you can see there's a big, huge embankment. I think it's 25 feet high, and then there's a 10-foot wall on top. On the other side of that is going to be houses very, very short. It's amazing how close civilization is getting to these racetracks. You can see their concrete wall. It was disheartening to see all that. So yes, that was the events there. I did get, let's see here, I had the camera view that I took. I guess I didn't put those in his let me drop them in his folder so I don't lose them. But yeah, so there's a picture I put on Facebook trying to show everybody we're out having a good time. And so here's run one. I got all 3 runs on here, and this is to watch the tire, and this is what we were kind of checking on. But oh, these all have sound. So let me turn that back. So you can see there the tire wrinkling. Now these are radial tires on here, so through this video I was able to see that we were running too low of air pressure in the tires. Made an adjustment, and this angle actually we could even see it even worse. See, here's the tire before it hits. You can see the yellow lights coming down the tree. Car leaves, and you can see the radial twisting up really bad. So we definitely knew we had tire pressure issues on this. Of course, too bad the Mustangs didn't have anything. We ran a Mustang every run, and they had nothing for the little straight 6 truck car motor. Hey Mike, how you doing? So this is the last run, and actually I haven't even seen this video. This was with a 1/2 pound air pressure change. So yeah, you can see the rim doesn't drop to the ground quite as hard on that run. So the situation we think we are right now is the rim is too narrow for this tire, because you can see here this last 1/2 inch on both sides aren't even making contact to the track, and that's why we were lowering tire pressure, trying to adjust that to get it to get a better contact patch, because the data log actually shows the car rolling the tire over. And probably what it's doing is it's going from here, and when it gets probably about, well, you can almost see it. It gets there, and then it starts wrinkling bad again there. So it actually, right in that section there, lost traction and grabbed it again. So we're going to work on that, and that definitely shows that we need a wider rim on the back of the car. So that's why we test, you know. You can race them on paper, but there's too many things. So anyway, so that was the weekend there. And we had a good time. Like I said, we ended up with an 8-second pass after all. So that was good. I'll put these together for Mike and get that all together, and he can do that. So anyway, so the main thing tonight I wanted to show you was sealant. I was talking with Rick a week or two ago, and he's like, you know, hey, can you do a video on sealants and the stuff you use to seal up the engines and stuff like that? Perfect timing, since Rick has his engine in a machine shop. And you know, I guess I really don't specify too much of that in the engine builds. So when I do Scott's engine build, I'll probably use some of this video in here. But so I went ahead and put a video together. Feel free, if you have a question, to put it in the chat, and we can stop and talk about it before we go through the whole video, or if you want to wait till the end, or whatever you want to do. But here it is. So without further ado, here's our sealant video on tonight. All right, so I had my buddy Rick asked me about chemicals for putting motors together, so I wanted to show you what I have here. All right, so tonight I wanted to talk about different chemicals that we use when we're putting an engine, transmission, differential, any of that kind of stuff together. So here's kind of a bunch of different Permatex products, RVT silicone, and we got some gasket sealer there. This is more of my favorite gasket sealer here, gasket cinch. You got Permatex. If you're going to use a copper head gasket or any kind of solid, you can use a Halimar. Got assembly lubes, different types of chemicals there. ARP assembly lube. This is really important for you guys. It's called Get. That is a tremendously good product for when your engine is being stored. You know, your carburetor, throttle body lets air in, and if you're in a high humidity area, your top of your cylinder walls, your valve seats, if they're iron, they'll start rusting. So you can use that Get, and it seals the metal parts from corrosion and just keeps the engine fresh all the time. I always like to have a bucket full of engine oil I soak my lifters in. Got extreme contact lube, grease for any of your metal-to-metal contact points for startup. Anabolic gasket maker. This is a really good product for metal-to-metal surfaces that you need to seal. And we have different types of gasket cleaning. You got a razor blade, got a couple scrapers, and then these work really good here. This is a 3M gasket remover. And then you've got some Scotch-Brites. These I typically do not like to use because they will remove material, especially on aluminum. You can use them on iron, but I prefer not to. I like this unit because it doesn't, it takes the gaskets off, but because it's soft rubber, it doesn't actually remove any material. So let me go ahead and put this on the stand and show you guys some of this stuff. All right, so go through some of these RTV. Sorry. So you've got two high temps. both red and ultra copper. Now these silicones are made for high temperature. The red is good for 650, the ultra copper is for 700. I use these primarily on exhaust gaskets and on headers. Like on drag cars where we're running a header with no gasket, we'll use the ultra copper, put a bead on, let it skin a little bit, and then that's the gasket. You do the same thing with the red. I typically do not use this for any other type of sealing, just exhaust stuff. So you got, if you're doing rear ends, Permatex makes one that's specific for gear oil. This will seal real good. If you've used black or clear or any of the other brands and then ended up with a gasket leak, this one will fix that problem. Now, anytime with all these silicone products, you need to make sure that there's no residual petroleum oil on the surface. So you want to clean them with brake clean or alcohol. Get them all clean, everything clean and dry, and then use that. Typically, on most of this stuff, I like to put a bead, let it sit for about 4 or 5 minutes to let it get a skin on it, and then put it on and seal it. When you do that, it'll, first of all, it won't stick to the surface you're going to, but it will make a nice gasket. Now, the longer you let it sit, the thicker, the more skin will dry the thickness of the bead, and you'll get a thicker gasket made out of silicone. If you're doing automatic transmissions, they make one that's specific for automatic transmission fluid. So if you're trying to seal up a case or something like that, this is the one to use more so than anything else. And you've got your ultra black and ultra gray. Now these are your mainstream engine glues. Now if you're working on late model cars where they don't use gaskets, a lot of your engines will have a two-piece block and there's no gasket in between. They say it's use RTV, or oil pans where they don't make a gasket, you would use these two products. The black is more of a general purpose, all purpose, and the gray is more set up for vibration. I guess it's maybe a thicker content. I don't know what the exact difference is, why they say that, but they're both, the black is more oil resistant and the black is more high torque resistant. So anywhere where you use high torque, you'd want to put this on, and anytime you're using something that's definitely wet, you want to go more towards this one. Now typically when I'm putting the motor together, I use clear. Now the clear is not, as they say, oil resistant as much, but I like it because it looks natural on the engine, and it's just something that I prefer myself. I'll use either the Permatex or I'll use Dow Corning, which they're pretty much the same product. So this works really good. I use it for China rails. I use it for when I'm sealing up the pan gaskets and stuff like that. So we'll talk more about that stuff when we get through. A really good tool is Versachem makes these, or Valco makes these pliers, and you put your tube of silicone through here, like so, and then you squeeze it through, and you can really make a nice design, like you're icing a cake basically. So it works really well. Makes it a lot easier on your hands. You don't have to be squeezing a tube, and because you're squeezing from the back forward, you'll get all the product out of your tube. So nice little tool to use. I'll put the number in the description. I'll put all the part numbers for all the stuff in the description, but this is a really good tool for applying silicone. Now on paper gaskets, I do not use a silicone or RTV, because RTV, as you know, it's kind of like a rubbery surface. So what happens is when you put it on paper, you can make the paper squeeze out as you're tightening down. So you don't want to do that. So what I like to use is gasket cinch. This is a really good product. You glue put a coat on the part, a coat on the gasket, let them tack up, and then put them on. And then like on intake gasket or stuff, I'll use a roller and roll it, and to push all the air out, and that makes a really good contact. That gasket will not shift. Really great on intakes because you don't want the intake gasket to get into the port when you've got something that's all port matched and everything. So this is what I like to use. Now as a alternate, You can use 3M trim adhesive. The only problem with this stuff is it comes out of a tube and it's kind of thick and bulky, where with the gasket cinch, it has an application ball, so you can get a nice smooth coating on what you're working on. Now there are certain times when you need to form a gasket, so I like to use this Permatex form a gasket, and this is like hydraulic compound. So I use this like on intake bolts, where the intake bolt is going into through the cylinder head and can get to the point where you get oil. I'm sure you've seen small block, big block Chevys and other motors where there's always a little puddle of oil in the intake right below the intake bolts. Well, that's because oil is wicking up through the threads of the bolts and it's coming out. So if you use a product like this on there, you won't have that issue. And one of the things I do is I also keep one of these that's open and it's gotten very tacky. So that works when I got something thick that I don't want it to get running. I use that. Eventually it'll dry up and then you can't use it anymore. Liquid Teflon, that's really good for small block, big block Chevys or any other engine that the head bolts go into the cooling system. You got to keep the water from coming through the threads. They'll wick up through the threads, and also it gives you a little bit of coating so that they don't rust. The bolts don't rust in the engine block. Rick ran into that with his 327, where the bolts all snapped off because they were rusted into the block. So that's a good product to use. It doesn't have to be this blue monster I got at Home Depot. You can use any type of Permatex makes one, but it's just a paste that you can brush on your bolts and stuff like that. I don't use this on fittings, pipe fittings and stuff like that, because I think it makes too much of a mess when you screw it in. It makes a big buildup around the thread at the end. So then you got to take a rag and wipe it off, and then if the motor's got paint or if it's raw aluminum and it's on the casting, and then you got to dig that off. For anything that uses a pipe thread that's either going to get water or gasoline, I use red Loctite for that. Just regular thread Loctite. It works great. Put a nice little coating on, you screw it in, and it's permanent. Anything that you're going to use head gaskets. If you're going to use a MLS and you want a sealant, or if you're using copper, Halimar is the product. A lot of people will use Ultra Copper. Ultra Copper is easier to get at your local parts store, but it doesn't work as good as Halimar. This stuff actually puts a blue RTV looking coating on the surface, and when use it on like a copper cylinder head, you won't have any oil leaks or anything like this stuff. It works really, really good. Never Sees, it has its place. You got something that's dissimilar metals and you want a lubricant on there, Never Sees works really well. Also on the tape dope, header bolts and aluminum cylinder head, I'll use Teflon tape and put that around the header bolts. It works really good as a tightening agent for the header bolts where they won't loosen up. Just an old trick I found years ago in a hot rod magazine. And we have silicone paste. I use this for O-rings and any kind of rubber products that need to be slipped together. So that works out really well for that. And of course, like I said, we got the Fog-It. This is a spray oil that you spray in the motor. You give it a couple, 2-3 second spray in each spark plug hole, and then spin the motor over and spray down the throttle body, and this will coat all your intake track and cylinders from rusting from humidity. Anytime, wherever the gasoline goes, that stuff is all metal clean. There's no oil residue left on there. So if you don't put some kind of coating on there and the motor sits for a week or two or longer, especially like in a trailer or like in a climate where there's high humidity, you will get rust. If you take the motor apart, you'll find the top of the cylinder walls are all rusty and everything. Now, when you fire up the motor, the rings are going to clean that rust off, but eventually it's going to create issues. You're going to get, that rust is getting between the rings and the cylinder walls. It's going to mess up the hone and stuff like that. So all top racers use this stuff. It works great. I use it. It also works really good for keeping, once you have your motor washed, you can spray your block with this. You can do I used to use WD-40. I'd wash the motor, bristle brush it, and then WD-40. But the problem with WD-40 is it evaporates over time. So if the motor is going to sit apart for any length of time, more than a day or two, I use the Fog It stuff, and it makes a nice coating. I've got blocks that are sitting here bagged, and they've been sitting for 6-8 months, and there's no rust on the cylinder walls with raw steel. So that works good. It's something you should always take a look at. So now I want to go ahead. Oh, I forgot the last two things. We got the extreme pressure lube. This comes in a little tube with any kind of Jessel valve train stuff. This is really good for push rod balls. Anywhere else where metal is going to be metal to metal, and it's not going to see lubricant until the engine's fired and running. So you want that initial break-in, you want everything lubricated. So this works really good for that, to keep everything from galling. Same with, we have a Clevite and bearing guard. This is the real thick red tacky stuff. This is really good for putting in bearings in your crankshaft. So you got a really nice thick coating to protect the bearing insert while you're assembling the motor, turning it over, and on initial startup. Once you start up, it's mixed in with the oil and it's gone. So that's no problem there. Now all your other components in the motor, your valve train, lifters, timing chain, camshaft, anything else needs lube, I'll use just a regular assembly lube. I myself, I don't know where my bottle is, but I use Royal Purple with Centerlick. It's a very good slippery unit. I've even used that for bearings, but the bearing guard is a better product for that. And then last, anaerobic sealer. So everybody's had issues with rear main seals, and the rear main seal goes all the way around the back of the block around your crank, but between your pan gasket and the rear main seal, it's metal to metal. That rear main cap goes down on the block, and it's metal to metal. You can put this stuff in there, make a nice bead through there, and this is really thin and stays pretty loose, so you can torque your main cap down, and it won't affect your torque, it won't affect your bearing clearance, but now you've got a sealant that's going from between your oil pan to the rear main seal, and it will stop a bunch of rear main seals leaks. A lot of rear main seals get blamed for the leaks when it's actually the part line between the cap and the block is actually where the oil is coming from, and this stops it. So that's a good product there, something you should keep in your toolbox. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera around. We're going to look at this Buick I have here. I'm going to be putting the engine together, and I can show you where I use the different products. So here we have a Buick 215 aluminum block, and I had to take it apart to do get the crankshaft balanced, and now I have to put the motor back together. So one of the things you want to do is get all your gasket surfaces clean. So we'll go ahead and take, because this is an older motor and this it's machined, the surface is machined for a composite gasket or a paper gasket, whatever you want to call it. It's got a very rough machining finish on it. So you can use a razor blade to clean it, but you're not going to get down in the grooves and get all the old gasket material out. So that's where this tool works really good. So we'll take this grinder here with the 3M wheel on there, and they call that a roll-lock brake disc. So we'll stick that on there, and you just use the grinder and just clean it up. Just go nice and easy. Keep the blades flat. It works really good. You see, no time at all, cleans all that material out real good. So there you go. We got a nice clean deck now, and it only took a couple seconds to do. Now, if it was machined for a late model gasket or for MLS, it's a very smooth surface, then I would just probably use a razor blade and clean it that way. So obviously this all has to be washed and everything before we do final, but different places that you want to use different kinds of chemicals. So
this is where your head gasket's going to go, and the gasket's going to go up here in this corner like it is on this side and meet. But the thing is, this may not be machine flat. It may be, you don't know. So I like to do is I like to take my silicone, I like to just put a thin bead right through here on both sides, put the gasket on, put the head on, torque it down. One of the problems you'll find is right here in this corner. This is where the head and the block and the intake all meet. That is a big common place for oil leaks. So you want to make sure you put the bead here, so that way you know that the head's sealed to the block, and then you can put a big dab in this corner here when you run your China rail silicone, and that way you get a good seal and you won't have any oil leaks. But that's a big place, a big problem point for oil. It leaks out of there all the time. People will say, it's the back of the intake. No, it's actually in that corner is usually where it's leaking. So you want to make sure you get this little edge here sealed with a little bit of silicone. You don't have to put much, just a little bit, just to make sure that any imperfections there are sealed up. Like I said, a big dab here. Now, this motor uses a tin valley tray, but if you're getting ready to put your intake manifold on, you'd want to put your intake on, and you want to notice how much gap you have at the China rail. Because when you get an intake gasket kit, it'll usually come with corks or rubber end pieces. That's fine for everything being stock, but we're using aftermarket intakes, sometimes aftermarket heads, even sometimes aftermarket blocks. So these clearances may not all be the same as it was from OEM. So that's why I never use the cork or the rubber seals here. But what I'll do is I'll place the intake on the engine. I'll use a piece of tape, masking tape, and tape the intake gaskets on, drop the intake down. I'll check my port match to see how my port match is, make sure my bowl holes line up, and then I look to see how much of a gap I have at the China rail. And that'll tell me how thick of a bead of silicone I need to make there. Is it really tight, or is it, I've seen them where it could be 1/4 of an inch, where you have to actually make 2 passes of silicone to get a good seal there. So those are little things you want to do to double check and triple check to make sure that when you put the engine together, you're going to get a good seal on it. Alright, so here's the bottom end of the engine. We have to get this all prepped up and ready to go. So we'll go ahead and use it on this. We use the gasket scraper, just a regular straight edge, and just kind of clean all the gaskets off. Get that all nice and clean. Here's where I was showing you about the anaerobic. So when you put your rear main seal in here, all this metal here, all that metal is just raw steel, raw metal to metal contact with the rear main cap. There's nothing there to make a seal. You have your rear main seal here in the middle, where it's going right through here, but you have all this metal coming up and around there. Now you can pack it all with silicone, but the problem with silicone is it's always going to change. It's going to stay thicker than nothing, and it's going to affect your bearing clearances. But the anaerobic is really thin, less than, I don't know how thin it is, but it doesn't, I've checked it, it doesn't affect your bearing clearances at all. So you want to come in here and lay a bead from the back of the rear main seal and up, fill this corner joint, because you got a corner in the block and then you've got the external corner in the cap. They may not always be the same. Good little weep hole could go through there, and that could be your rear main seal leak. So put a nice little bead around there, right around here, and then up the sides. Put your cap in, and that'll help seal up the rear main, and hopefully you won't have any oil leaks. So typically on cork gaskets on the oil pan, I will use the gasket cinch. I'll gasket cinch the block and the intake out of the oil pan gasket, and I will stick the oil pan gasket to the block. Take the roller, roll it out to make sure it's nice and flat. It works really good too if you're going to do it in the car where the block is overhead. The gasket cinch will make sure that the gasket stays in place. And then obviously on this engine, the oil pan is flat. It takes a flat cork gasket all the way around. But a lot of your motors will have where the oil pan surface is in the center line of the crankshaft, you're going to have half moons on the front and back. So what I do with that, again, a lot of times we're using aftermarket parts, is once I get the motor together and I got the cap in, I'm ready to put the oil pan on. First thing I'll do is put the oil pan on with no gasket. And what I want to do is I want to look at those half moons at the rear main and at the front timing cover and make sure that they are the same thickness all the way around. I have seen oil pans where it's tight on one side and a big gap on the other side. If that's the case, using the rubber end pieces that comes in the gasket kit is not going to seal the oil pan properly. So at that point, I would again use the RTV and make a bead thickness a little bit larger, like an 1/8 inch larger than what we want. Let it skin for a minute or two, and then put the pan together and then clean the edges when you're done, and you'll have a perfect seal when the pan may not be lined up with the block properly. If it's lined up properly, I'd use the gasket cinch and glue the rubber to the block into the timing cover, and then you want to put wherever you have gaskets meeting. So you'll have a rubber piece going to cork. You want to put a nice dollop of silicone there in the corners, and that way when the pan is tightened down, that will fill any voids of the two pieces joining, and that will should stop any fuel leaks, any oil leaks there. So you always want to try to do that. But you want to test fit all your parts first, because again, we're not dealing with OEM parts, we're dealing with aftermarket parts, and they may not be 100% correct. So that's that. Of course, the timing cover. The timing cover is a paper gasket, so that's going to get the gasket cinch, gasket glued on, gasket cinch on the opposite side, and then the timing cover put on, water pump, thermostat housing gaskets, any paper gaskets. That's what we would do there, is use the gasket cinch on both sides of the gasket. You'll see when you're applying the gasket cinch to it, and why I like using that more so than the trim adhesive, is because you got the little wand to get the coating on. You'll see the paper will absorb the coating. You usually have to put 2 coats on the paper. So that's good, because now you got glue embedding into the paper, and then glue on this surface. When they stick together, now you've got a good bond, and when you tighten it up, all that absorbed glue will help aid in sealing, and it won't work as a bearing and push the gaskets out. If you ever take a motor apart that was done in all silicone, you'll see that the gaskets are all shifted around the holes. They're kind of ripped because silicone works as like a ball bearing. So as you tighten it down, the silicone is squeezing out, and it takes the gasket with it, and so you can create more issues that way than just using paper gasket with nothing on it. So again, anything that's water or anything like that, timing cover, all that stuff, paper, material to material with paper gasket, I prefer to use the gasket cinch, and that works out really well. Now, one thing I forgot to tell you on the intake gaskets, let me flip this back over again. Okay, so one of the things I didn't tell you earlier is intake gaskets. So typically the intake gaskets we use usually like a Felpro type material or Mr. Gaskets. So I will take the gasket cinch once again, gasket cinch the head surface and the gasket surface that goes against the head. Get a good coating on there. Use the roller and roll them on there. Okay, get the roller so you can see here. I put the gasket on and roll it. Make sure you got all the air worked out of it and the gasket is nice and flat. All right. Now, at that point, you have a decision to make what you're going to do. So we can glue the gaskets down or tape them down. Check our end rail gaps, which we talked about earlier, so we know how thick the end rails have to be. But now, as far as sealing this up, we can decide what we're going to be doing. So if this is going to be your street motor, or race motor, you're putting it together, it's not coming apart for any time soon, then I would.
Yeah, the camera is out of focus. I found after I filmed all this that there is a scratch in the lens, and it was making it not focus. I really sorry about that, and I'm going to fix it for next time. But that is a problem there. I meant to stop and mention that earlier, but I apologize for that. But here's let you finish up this segment.
Usually use the form gasket, whether you're what you're going to do. So we can glue the gaskets down or tape them down. Check our end rail gaps, which we talked about earlier, so we know how thick the end rails have to be. But now, as far as sealing this up, we can decide what we're going to be doing. So if this is going to be your street motor, or race motor, you're putting it together, it's not coming apart for any time soon, then I would usually use the forma gasket, Permatex forma gasket, and put a coating over the gasket to the intake side. And I would use the silicone and make my China wall silicone and make sure I get my corners nice and a big dollop on there, so that when you put the intake together, it forces it into the corners. And that will seal your intake up really good. And again, if you're on this motor, these intake holes are blind, but like on a small block Chevy, they go through the intake casting, and the threads actually come out the back side. You want to use forma gasket on your intake bolts so that oil can't wick through the bolts and leak. Now, when we're going to do a dyno session, we're going to do intake swaps and stuff, or if you got a part, say you got a handmade gasket that you made for your intake, you can't get the right gasket, so you had to cut one by hand. So you're going to want to be able to reuse that gasket. Then what I would do is glue them down to the head surface like we talked earlier with the gasket cinch. But then I would use a wheel bearing grease and put that on the mating surface to the cylinder head. That way it doesn't stick to the intake. You can pull the intake off, it's going to come off fresh. Your gasket will be good, you'll be able to reuse your gasket. And then same as with your China rail. So if we're going to go to the dyno and we're going to do intake swaps, we don't want to be waiting a full day for the silicone to dry, because a race motor usually has either a dry sump system or it has a vacuum pump, so you're pulling the engine into a vacuum. Whenever you have a situation like that, the silicone has to be completely dry, or the vacuum in the engine block will actually suck the silicone in and you'll end up with a gasket leak. So what I would do then is build my China rail with silicone just like normal, but I would take a thin coat of the Never Seas and put a little film on the intake manifold at the China rail, so that when you pull it down, the intake goes against your silicone gets a nice flat surface, and it seals to the intake. The Never Seas will not create a leak there, but when you take the intake off, the intake won't stick to the silicone, and now you can swap to the next intake, and you don't have to worry about waiting for the silicone to dry. It works really good if you're on a dyno and you want to do 2 or 3 intakes in one day, because you're paying for the dyno session. It's typically $500-600 a day, $750 a day, whatever it is. So you don't want to be on there for multiple days because you had to wait for silicone to dry. So that's a really easy, quick trick. Now, intake gaskets, you're going to take, or carburetor throttle body gaskets, you're going to be taking that apart. Maybe not a lot, but anything you want, or any place where you don't want a gasket to rip, and sealing, you're not sealing any moisture, you're only sealing air. You can use a wheel bearing grease on both sides of the gasket, and that'll create that gasket to become a non-stick gasket. It was before they made the blue gaskets for Holley carburetors. That used to be the big trick. When you used the black or the red metering plate gaskets, we would use the silicone paste and paste or Vaseline and cover the gasket, and that way it could come back apart and you wouldn't rip the gaskets. But now they get the blue gaskets and they work pretty good for that. But that's kind of what chemicals I use. So all of your lifter side to the engine block, any of that kind of stuff. A little assembly lube works great. Your camshaft, if it's a flat tappet, obviously you have to put a cam break-in chemical paste or break-in fluid on your camshaft. If it's a roller, then you can use a little bit of assembly lube goes a long ways, and you can use that and get your camshaft coated, all your bearings. You know, you can use a bearing guard or you can use an assembly lube. That'll work great for that. Again, if your cylinder head bolts are not blind holes and there's coolant on the back side, you have to put some kind of Teflon paste so that you can use tape, but paste is better because you need that head bolt to be lubricated to torque properly, and you need it to seal. Now, anything that gets torqued, you got to look at your manufacturer's specs. So I keep a tub of ARP assembly lube. That's what's in this container. Every bottle I get, every tube I get, I pour in here. So any of the ARP hardware, this gets a moly paste. You want to do under the head, on the washer and stuff, so it torques properly. Some ARP rod bolts, same thing. Now some motors will use oil, especially aluminum rods. They don't want you to use the moly, they want you to use motor oil. So you got to take a little squirt can, get your little motor oil in there, and tighten it down. Same with your head bolts or your main bolts and stuff. Depending on which bolts you're using. If you're using ARP, obviously ARP wants you to use their moly. If you're using stock bolts, you can use moly if you've checked the line bore properly, but the moly will allow the bolt to slip and get a better torque spec than it would with motor oil. So you want to make sure whatever you're using was used when the line bore was checked on the block, because it will shift, same as connecting rods. So whatever was used when the machinist checked it out, typically on stock stuff they'll use a thin coating of engine oil. You don't want to soak it in engine oil, because what can happen then, if it's a blind hole in the main bolt, it can actually create a hydraulic in the bottom, and you won't get a proper torque on the bolt. So just a little bit of lube on there and a little bit underneath the head of the bolt, so it torques down properly, and that's good to go. And then of course with ARP, you use the moly and you can get your proper torque spec. I think that's pretty much it. So like I said, if you're using MLS gaskets or copper, the Halimar is a really good product for your gasket sealing surface. Halimar, they make a bunch of different products. This is pretty much the only one I use, but they make a bunch of RTV products also. I typically stay with the Permatex stuff for engine assembly and transmission and stuff like that. That's easier to get. The Halimar has to be ordered online. I haven't found anybody in South Florida that stocks this stuff, so I order this online. Foggit, get directly from foggit.com, and rest of the stuff you can get from pretty much your parts store. Usually anybody who sells Clevite can get you the bearing guard. They may not have it in every place. And this stuff, if you haven't seen it, it's really thick. See, it's so thick it won't even come out of the bottle. There it is. So it's really thick and tacky. You can see how it comes apart. Really puts a really nice coating on the parts, so that the bearing inserts are protected while you're assembling the motor, rolling it over, putting the pistons in, and stuff like that. So I think that's it. So if you have any questions, hopefully you guys, while I was doing this, you could put it up on the chat or leave them in the comments, and I'll see them and answer them as quickly as I can. But that's what I do when I'm assembling these engines. I will be doing a video on this engine, going back in Scott's car. You can see I kind of cheated it up and only took half the motor apart, because I had to get the crank out to balance the crank. So we took 2 pistons, the crankshaft, the new flex plate, and the new balancer to the machine shop, and they balanced the rotating assembly for me, and now we're putting it together. The motor is a fairly fresh build. It may be a couple years old or whatnot, but looking at the hone in the cylinder walls and the wear on the bearings and stuff, everything's perfect. It's all going right back together the way it was. So it was a fairly recent build. So we're just putting all back together. But I did need to balance it, because whoever assembled it assumed that everything was balanced properly, and we found out it wasn't. So now it'll have a good balance, and we'll get rid of the vibrations in this thing, and this thing will go good together. So I think that's it. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.
So that was a video I put together, and I actually did it just a little bit before the show, and as you could see, unfortunately, I think that lens is damaged. And when I started, I was looking through the viewfinder, I saw it was kind of a little out of focus, and I played with the settings, and it got pretty good in there. So I went ahead and thought I had it pretty good, but obviously when you see it on the playback, it still was pretty far out of focus. So I apologize about that. Really sorry about that. One of the things I see a wrench says like Permatex Ultra Slick. I haven't used that product, and I use the Royal Purple Assembly Lube. I've used some other brands, but those anyway are more liquidy. So like when you pour the Royal Purple in the bearing inserts and you put the crank in, it'll actually run out and run down the sides of the block and stuff. But the bearing guard, the reason I like using that is that will not come out. That will stay stuck between the bearing and the crank, and it'll be there till you pressurize it with engine oil, and it'll then mix in with the oil. But that is the best product I've found for not scuffing bearings. So one of the other things I didn't put in the video, and I didn't think about it. So pan gaskets. So when we're doing Ultra Slick is thick as well. I'll have to look into that, because the bearing guard sometimes isn't easy to get locally either. But one of the things one of the processes I didn't put in. So using cork gaskets, like I said, I use the gasket cinch, glue the gasket to the block, roll it out, make sure they're laying flat. I will use the Permatex forma gasket and coat the pan side of that gasket to make sure it has a good seal against the cork. And what I will do, and reason why I like using the clear silicone over the traditional black and gray, is what I'll do is I'll put the pan bolts in and just lightly snug the pan down to where it's not sealed yet. And then I'll run a bead with the clear silicone down the gasket, and then work it in with my thumb, and then torque the pan gasket, the oil pan, down properly to spec, and then I'll wipe the excess off, and it just like locks the pan to the block. And I've never had any oil pans leaking when that's done. And of course, with the clear on your China rails and locking in the oil pan gaskets like that, you don't see the clear. So it cleans up real nice, and it's just that extra protection. One thing that, as an engine assembler, the last thing I want to do is have an engine that has an oil leak. That's it takes a good amount of time. We've talked on the show before, and there's some videos on the channel of engine assemblies that I've done, and I show the blueprinting process and the assembly process. So start to finish, I mean, it's very easy to spend 12 to 20 hours on an engine assembly, getting everything measured and sealed up and everything. So the last thing you want to do is put all that time and effort into the motor, and then you put it in the car, and bingo, you got an oil leak, and you got to start all over again. So those are the little processes I like doing. Oil pans are one of those notorious, especially when you got the tin pans. They are notorious for creating oil leaks. The aluminum billet, the aluminum aftermarket pans are better, but now you've got a pan that's been welded together, and I have seen, not very often, but I have seen where the pans will have shift, or they'll have twist from all the heating when they were doing all the aluminum welding. So it's just good to go ahead and lock all that stuff in the way I like to do it, and it just looks real clean when you're done. Mike says they've had us using Lubriplate 105, less, and I've had plenty of good luck with it, at least in the stock engines. Yeah, okay. Okay, so you guys have used that. Both you guys have used that. Okay. Yeah, and you know the thin, like I said, the Royal Purple style, or there's a couple other brands that have a fairly thin. It's like maybe a 60 weight or 80 weight viscosity assembly lube. I mean, I've had good luck with those products and not having bearing scuff, but I just feel that the bearing guard just gives you that little extra added protection, especially when the motor's going to sit for a long time. I've always worried because so like I said, you can have 12 to 20 hours in an assembly with blueprinting, and so at the end of the first day, I usually have the short finished, and I'll put a bag on it and you know, leave the shop. The next morning, you pull the bag off, and the bottom of the bag is full of assembly lube, you know, or the drip tray pan is full of assembly lube. So I've always just didn't like the fact that how much of that is running out of the bearing. Some of that may just be squish coming from the you know, from the thickness of the clearance, but the bearing guard, I just don't see it as much, and so it just makes you feel better. Personal preference, I guess. Let's see, Rick says, awesome, he's got referencing this, got shopping list done, yep. Team Junk, great video, my buddy Eddie, yep. Put my motor, yeah, that thing's been together for a long time. But yeah, so I just wanted to get that out there because I know on the videos I've done, the assembly videos, engine assembly videos, I show the products, but I really don't mention how I'm installing them and stuff. So that makes it, you know, you don't get all that information out there. But we'll go ahead and when I go ahead and put this Buick motor together, I'm going to go over it again with a different lens on the camera so we can get that. So if you want to look exactly, follow through how I do all the gaskets, I'll go ahead and do a more thorough job on that Buick motor. That aluminum 215, those are notorious engines for everything. GM had so much issues with them that they ended up, no, it's a pre-nail head. They only made the 215 and then in the aluminum, and then later they made a 300, like in 65 or 64, they made a 300 cubic inch out of iron. But they had a lot of problems with the aluminum castings, the way they were casting them. In fact, if I recall correctly, they were getting 1 out of 3 blocks were able to be used. So they'd take the other 2, melt them down, and then recast again, trying to get good solid castings out of them. They put those in your Skylarks, Le Mans, Tempest, F85s, and those were the Y body cars. It was the predecessor of the A body. So 61, 62, 63. They used them in some other model cars also. There was some Vegas built with those in one of the early years of the Vegas, because it was all aluminum, so it was lightweight. But they ended up selling those castings and engineerings to Land Rover, and Land Rover redesigned the casting process, and they used that engine all the way up into 2002, I believe. And they went from a 215 all the way up to I think a 305 or 3. I think it was 4.9 was their largest one. Now this particular engine has the 300 crank in it, with Chevy connecting rods and some kind of piston, some kind of combination that people threw together, and it makes it a 266. So that's what this motor is, actually a stroked motor. And that was where the problems came in with this engine, is that because of the hodgepodge piston rod crank into a different block, the rear main has to be machined to fit the proper seal. The 215 crankshaft or a flex plate will not fit the engine. You have to use a 300. And then this car actually has a 700R4 behind it with an adapter plate. And the shop that originally put this engine together went ahead. The engine was assembled and was put in an MGB, which Land Rover put those in MGBs also. So any of the V8 MGB cars are going to be the Rover version of this 215. But this one was in a GTB MG, and my buddy Scott purchased it from them online. They said it only had 3,000 miles on it because they pulled it out to put a 302 Ford engine in it. And after we put it in his car and ran it and had the vibration issues, I'm sure that is the reason why the guy pulled the motor out and sold it in lieu of a 302. Either he figured it was a problem with the engine design that it had vibrations, or it was just a fact of it wasn't balanced correctly. Because when I started working on this car, it had a stick shift flywheel on the back of it with an aluminum adapter with a steel plate adapter that went to the 700R4 transmission, but it didn't have a pilot for the converter, so the converter had no way of centering, and the aluminum and steel adapter to the flex plate didn't have any way of indexing either. It was just using the crankshaft bolts that hold the flex plate on to center all that. There was no locators built into it, so that was hodgepodge. Every time you took it apart, put it back together, it was different. So this motor was externally balanced with the flex plate, but the bolt pattern only allows you to go in one direction. But it was neutral on the balancer, but the balancer must have been off too, because when they balanced the crank, the new aluminum flex plate that we used on the back, that was only 18 grams out, but the front with the correct balancer was like 35 or 40 grams out. So the crank was never balanced correctly to start with. But now we got it. The guys at MPR, the local race shop, they balanced the thing, and it's perfect now. So it's going to run real good. And now we have the proper aluminum flex plate with the proper pilot adapter to the transmission converter. So all that stuff's all fixed. It's all going to be lined up. It'll be good. No, don't worry about that. I want I want this to be an open community where everybody has something to say, and kind of like bench racing back in the day. I don't want to be the talking head here, just spewing the whole entire show. I love it when people put up ideas and we can bounce them around and go from there. So no problems with that at all. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to get that thing put together, and like I said, I will make sure I get a good lens on the camera when I do the assembly, and I will show using the gaskets and the chemicals and how I put it all together, and you better see it firsthand. This motor will be a little bit different because, like I said, it has a tin valley tray in it, and so it has a tin intake gasket, so it's going to be a little different than your normal. So I will have to use a little bit different products there than we normally would, but it'll be good. So anyway, appreciate Rick giving me the idea for the show. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. If anybody's got any thoughts on maybe a project you're working on and you'd like to see some more stuff going on, we can go over that. Since the GoPro 7 is a cheap cam, I have a 9 and a 7, and I use those for the motion stuff, but with the wide angle, sometimes it's harder to get the up close. This camera I'm using here is a M50 Canon, but after I was done and I saw it was blurry, I grabbed a lens, and unfortunately sometimes I'm pretty bad about not putting the cover on it, and there is a scratch on the lens, and I think that's why the autofocus was having an issue. I think it was the scratch was creating an issue in the background. You don't see the scratch in the video, but it is on the lens, and I'm gonna work on that tomorrow. I think I've got 3 more lenses, so I'll make sure to change the lens, do some testing, and see what it is. And if it is, then I will have to either try to see if I can get that lens fixed or just replace it. So appreciate all the information, and like I said, hope everything was good for you. We will have another live show next Tuesday. So one more show before Christmas. It'll be episode 125. Kind of crazy. We've had that many shows. I think we're going to start going back through some of the old stuff, because in the beginning I didn't label everything quite as well. So we'll do some more wiring and plumbing, and break down all the vehicles, brake system and cooling system and fuel systems and all those things, and go over all them all over again. So like I said, if you guys got a project you're working on, you want to see something in particular, put it in the comments. Email me. My email and everything is on the main page. Subscribe to the channel. It's free. You won't get any spam or anything. It just helps you YouTube link you to my stuff. If I put something up, it'll give you notifications. If you ring the bell, it'll give you instant notifications in your email. Hit the like button and share with your friends. It all helps with the algorithm, and we keep moving the channel forward. We're really close to 2,000 subscribers, and I think we're really close to like 7,000 likes, and we're up in the 300,000 total views. So I really appreciate everybody spending your Tuesday nights coming and watching the show, and anything we can do to help. I'm putting this stuff out here to just share my knowledge of the 40-something years I've been doing this. Just want to pass it on to everybody else. So that'll be the show for tonight. Appreciate it, and I'll see y'all next week. Let me get the music going here, and I'll see y'all next week. See ya.